talk about Is Ted OK number 3, and while we're on the subject, let's talk about story structure a little bit. So Dave Chisholm, the author slash artist slash colorist slash letterer slash jack of all trades for Is Ted OK, recently put a video up on his social media that I really liked. This is his TikTok, incidentally. He basically talks about how indie comic writers, and I guess comic writers in general, often tend to front load the early issues of their stories with like bits and pieces of stuff that's to come later to essentially serve as a hook to keep readers around. I kind of call it the sampler platter theory of comic book writing. And basically his message from the video, or at least the message I interpreted, is that creators shouldn't be afraid to take big swings and like shake up the gumball machine as it relates to their story structure and what they do in their stories, and not feel bound by a particular formula or pattern. It's a really interesting video. I recommend you check it out. It was put up on April 22nd. And Chisholm definitely takes his own advice in this issue. There are a few hard turns in this issue that you just don't see coming. And that's a good thing. So in this issue, there's basically a giant work party at Ted's workplace, and he and Sarah find out different things about each other, and yeah, like I said, few different swerve turns. I understand why certain authors and creators sort of do the sampler platter method. I mean, it's hard to get and keep people's attention in this day and age, what with their TikToks and their social medias and... Wait a minute. But in a perfect world, you wouldn't have that. You know, creative types would be able to kind of stick to their guns and their laurels and create as they choose to. And sometimes, if you do stick to your guns, it pays off in the long run, as we've seen with Is Ted OK? This continues to be one of the more interesting books on the market right now. Really effective opening scene as we're drawn into one of Ted's nightmares. It's unlike anything we've seen in the book thus far. My only question is, why is Ted wearing what appears to be a chicken helmet? I mean, that's not to say chickens can't be nightmarish. I mean, certainly we all remember the cockfighting episode of Seinfeld, R.I.P. little Jerry Seinfeld. Does that joke land? I don't know. Maybe this is a case where I don't want to know how old my core audience is. You know, God forbid somebody ever asks me to teach a class on comic books, or a class on anything for that matter. But you know, if I ever were to be put in that position, I could potentially use Do Not Disturb from Invader Comics to teach at least 2 different lessons, issue 3 of which just came out. So of course we're still in the Argyle Hotel here, which is kind of an in-between zone between our world and the afterlife. Our ghostly detective main character, Randall Halsey, is still trying to solve the assault, potential murder of the Veronica character in sort of a redemption arc for himself. And in this story, some secrets are revealed, both about the attack and about Randall's ghostly companion, Oscar. So the first lesson I could teach with Do Not Disturb is how to create a world, a setting that your audience wants to get lost in, that's also really visually interesting. I knew that the Argyle was going to fit that bill from the beginning, and thankfully it has lived up to its potential thus far. And the second is how the right colorist, Lorenzo Scaramella in this case, can really elevate a book. You know, when I recently got to talk to our creators here, Jared Hunter Rowe and David R. Flores, they both mentioned that Scaramella elevated Do Not Disturb by sort of taking the coloring into like a European abstract sort of sensibility. And I was really glad that they said that because, again, I've kind of echoed this sentiment since the beginning. You know, I'm sure a more traditional colorist would have been fine, but Scaramella's colors are really what pushed this book over the top. But yeah, I'm really interested to see how this creative team sticks the landing next issue. They've definitely got my interest. And by the way, if you want to see the interview that I did with Rowan Flores, you can go visit it at the URL you see on your screen. Has Batman entered his soft girl era? I don't know the answer to that, or if I'm even using that term correctly, but that's kind of what I was thinking about coming out of Batman number 9. So in this issue, the establishment is very much against Batman still. We've got Poison Ivy as the mayor, we've got Vandal Savage as the police commissioner, and here Batman and his cohorts kind of enact a plan to work against them. I'm not going to tell you exactly what it is, but as you might tell from the cover, it kind of involves Barbara Gordon quite a bit. Bruce Wayne and Damian, Robin, have kind of a tender moment in this issue, and I don't know, just that moment combined with the renewed brightness in Batman's costume just made me feel like Batman is a nicer guy right now in the comics than he's been in many, many years. And that's not a bad thing, by the way. I think that when you had Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams in the 70s kind of turned Batman back into a loner, that compounded with some of the Frank Miller stuff in the 80s, and then by the time you got to the 90s and the 2000s, Batman was kind of a paranoid jerk. And Batman doesn't always need to be a paranoid jerk. I mean, as we see in this issue, he can have his nice guy moments and enjoy being Batman and still star in good stories. The Michael Lane version of Azrael makes an appearance in this issue. That's kind of cool. I don't think we've seen him in a while. So Tim Drake has only been retired for a couple of months, but based on something we see in this issue, I would be surprised if his retirement lasts more than a year. I just think Matt Fraction, our author here, has a plan for him, and that's not a bad thing either. Hey, do you guys remember Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter? It was a book, I think a series of books actually, which was basically what it sounded like. It was Abraham Lincoln hunting vampires. Well, keeping that story in mind, If Destruction Be Our Lot #1 kicks off a story that's kind of like Abraham Lincoln Robot Revolutionary, or at least it seems that way so far. So this book is about a version of Earth where humanity has gone extinct and robots overrun the world, and some of the robots just continue doing the work that they did when humans were around. You know, they keep with their old routine. And one of them is this Abraham Lincoln impersonator robot, like this educational robot that looks like Lincoln and recites Lincoln's speeches, etc., etc. And in this first issue, the Lincoln robot kind of starts to ponder his own existence, a greater meaning to things. He gets existential, basically, and that sort of starts him off on a journey against the grain of the established order. I thought this was supremely creative and thought-provoking and fun. You know, I don't want to say that it's the kind of story that you can only do in comics, but I think it's a story that might be best suited for the world of comic books. So I'm glad that we have it in a comic book. The world that they create here is really immersive and really fun to be in. Thanks in large part to the art by Andy McDonald and our colorist Francesco Segala. With this first issue of If Destruction Be Our Lot, I really got the sense that I was looking at something special. And I have not said that about the first issue of a new comic book in a couple of years, I think. So naturally, this book zipped onto my pull list pretty quickly. The Digger, #3 from Invader Comics, made me think of a Dr. Evil quote. Yes, that's actually true. That quote being, "Uh-oh, someone had some daddy issues." All bald men have a Dr. Evil impression. I've said that before. It might not be a good one, but they have one. But in this issue, the Kid and the Digger, the murderous, sinister treasure hunter that he's on this hunt through the Olmec ruins with, get a break in their search, and the Kid ultimately has to decide whether he wants to be in league with the highly questionable hunter. I really like T.S. Luther's writing in this issue. We start off with a flashback scene that shows us the kid with his father and shows us how he kind of looked up to his father. And then as the issue progresses, we see that he's kind of got the opportunity to find himself a surrogate father in the Digger. You know, with some comic book projects, you can tag another artist in, and that artist can kind of pick up where the previous artist left off, and they both can kind of follow the same vision and get to the same destination. I do not believe The Digger is one of those books. I think Sam Goodillin's art and Sam Goodillin's vision here with the pencils and the inks and the colors really make it stand out from everything else on the market. You can't do The Digger without him. Like, for instance, look at the negative space in this image where the kid is waking up. Like, look at all the black space. It's still got that inky, treasure mappy texture. Like, that's so cool. This might actually be my favorite page in the issue. And Goodillin even manages to work some cutesy appeal in there with the little kid version of the kid. I do still find myself wishing that the kid had a name, like a proper name other than just the kid. I don't know, especially as we get to know him and kind of develop a relationship with him. It feels like we should know his name. But, you know, names notwithstanding, The Digger continues to get high marks from me. June 1st is, I believe, the final order cutoff date for issue 4, the final issue. That's the final day that you can ask your local comic shop to order the issue for you. You can't get mad about something if it comes pre-advertised and you buy in anyway. Tigress Island number 3 kind of reminded me of that. So to reiterate, we're in this exploitation kind of story where we have a bunch of Hollywood actress types who've been taken to this island where women are forced into like sexualized servitude, and we've reached the point in the story where they're actively trying to escape this compound, and they head out into the wilderness, and there's lots of things waiting for them there. So there's no nudity in Tigress Island, but because it is an exploitation story by design, some of the images and the poses we find our sexy female characters in are exploitative. Like, for instance, there's a moment where a character gets her shirt ripped off and she has to go topless for the remainder of the issue. In a regular story, so to speak, that would cause alarm bells to go off in my head. But because this is an exploitation story and it's advertised as such, I kind of have to ignore those alarm bells. It makes for a really interesting reading experience because I'm not normally one to venture into the world of exploitation storytelling. But the art here by EPHK continues to be a real treat. Some of our characters go out into like a swamp setting toward the end of this issue. That's fun. But yeah, all in all, I've found that Tigress Island is forcing me to, I guess, expand my creative palette and look at and think about things in a way that I wouldn't normally. And that's a quality you wouldn't necessarily expect from a book like this at face value. What if Green Arrow was the Punisher? I don't know if that was kind of the pitch for Absolute Green Arrow, issue 1 of which is out now, but that's kind of what we get, and you know what? I'm not mad at it. So in this issue we meet Dinah Lance, who is a bodyguard slash former cop slash former MMA fighter. She corresponds to Black Canary, of course, in the regular DC universe. And she's kind of caught in the crosshairs as the Green Arrow killer comes after these evil, awful rich people, basically. And when I say evil rich people, one of them is, like, blatantly, obviously, a Jeffrey Epstein allegory. So that's the kind of thing we're looking at here. And by the way, we don't know who the Green Arrow killer is. The Absolute Universe version of Oliver Queen was killed off a few months ago in the Absolute Evil one-shot. So the killer's identity is a mystery to us. as much as any of the other Absolute books, if not more. Absolute Green Arrow definitely feels pulled from modern headlines, modern culture, the whole American greed, the rich versus the middle class and the poor, that kind of thing. And that obviously really fits well with the social justice side of the Green Arrow character that he kind of adopted when Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams got their hands on him in the 70s. Part of the idea of the Absolute Universe, at least as I understand it, is to strip away kind of the superficial continuity elements of these classic characters, yet still maintain what their core essence is. And it feels like Absolute Green Arrow #1 accomplishes that. There is definitely a cathartic dimension to this story, what with all these horrible things happening to these horrible rich people. Now, to be clear, I don't think we should be killing or torturing rich people in the real world, but stories like this can kind of serve as a way for us to work through and process our thoughts, emotions, feelings about the world as it is right now. And I think as long as we distinguish fantasy from reality, it's fine. But yeah, I'm definitely in for more here. Right now, I think this is only supposed to go 6 issues, but that was also the case with Absolute Martian Manhunter, and it's about to wrap up with its 12th issue. So my impression is that if this does well, we'll get more Absolute Green Arrow. The Shredder channels his inner Batman in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder #8. So we're still in Tokyo in this issue as a Japanese mafia type group basically sends a bunch of techno and mutagenically enhanced soldiers, like commando type soldiers, after Shredder, and he responds in kind. I don't know to what extent, if any, this was done intentionally, because there's naturally some crossover between the two characters, but there's a lot of Batman type stuff in this issue. In our opening sequence, Shredder kind of covertly and sneakily takes out a bunch of soldiers in a way that really reminded me of like stealth mode in the Batman Arkham games. And then a little bit later on, there's a dramatic moment where we get a lightning strike outside in the rain that illuminates him, much like the famous image from the opening sequence of Batman the Animated Series. I also really love the scars and the scar tissue on Shredder's body, which is something that he has in common with Bruce Wayne / Batman, specifically in that famous Alex Ross painting that was done many years ago. But whether you think he's stealing from Batman or not, this Shredder book continues to overachieve creatively. If you're a Ninja Turtles fan, I highly recommend it. Incidentally, and I'm not getting any kind of kickbacks to promote it, but Bat in the Sun, I think, has a Batman vs. Shredder fan film coming out this summer. It's like the Michael Keaton, Tim Burton version of Batman against the TMNT movie version of Shredder from 1990. And Batman in that movie is being played by, of all people, my old C2E2 buddy and former Red Ranger, Jason Fount. So, take a look. Masking has become a political issue in the last several years, more than I think anyone could have anticipated. And I mean, it's an issue for a couple of different reasons, whether you're talking about medical purposes, like for COVID, or let's say if you're part of a certain militia group. And that has certain implications for superhero stories because, as we know, most superheroes wear masks. Superman Unlimited #13 might be the first comic book, or at least the first comic I've read, to address that masking issue of the modern era, in an issue that's ultimately about a superpowered chimpanzee. So yeah, in this issue we kind of get a modernized version of Beppo the Super Monkey as a superpowered chimpanzee is unleashed on the city, and 2 versions of John Kent, one from the past and one from the future, have to kind of work together to stop him. There's a scene in this issue where the John Kent of the future, Tomorrow Man, who wears a mask, is met with fear by a group of onlookers in Metropolis because he is wearing a mask. And as we know, most superheroes in Metropolis don't wear masks or hide their identities. And I just thought that was really interesting and kind of cool. I mean, it doesn't say anything per se about masking in its modern context, but at least it kind of incorporates it a little bit. Superman himself continues to be missing in the DC universe at the moment, so Superman Unlimited continues to do what it has done really well since the beginning, honestly, and that's make great use of the Man of Steel's supporting cast. It also does readers a service by reminding us that chimpanzees are not our friends and don't make good pets. They're wild animals that can hurt you. Did we learn nothing from Chimp Crazy on Netflix? So in Hyde Street number 12, something terrible and violent happens to Pranky, the evil Boy Scout. And once again, with this Hyde Street series, I was left looking at a page thinking, they can do that? So after some back and forth between our characters here, the Butcher of Hyde Street, who's like this awful killer character, is set loose, and he shows us why he is such a brutal killer character promptly. But yeah, I'm not going to tell you what it is, but the Butcher character does something very violent and over the top to Pranky, the evil Boy Scout, who, at least physically, is about 10 years old. And this was the most surprised I've been by something physical they've done with the Pranky character since what I will call the choking scene in issue 2. I'm not morally outraged or anything by what they did here. I mean, let's keep things in perspective. This is a pretend child in a made-up story. But I am surprised at the physicality of the moment, like that they show it to you. I guess I'm kind of used to some governing body, like a Comics Code of Authority type organization, or even the publisher stepping in and saying, you can't do that. It's kind of refreshing in a way that these creators have that kind of artistic freedom to push the boundaries and kind of do what they want to do and make readers uncomfortable to a certain extent, as weird as that is to say about something so violent and awful. I think I may have actually stumbled onto a new tagline for this book. Hyde Street. Yup, they can do that. This is actually my favorite page in the book overall. Just the matinee monster kind of turning his head a little bit, and our penciler Yvonne Reese kind of taking that opportunity to do something cool with the art and overlap the top 2 panels. It definitely helps in that respect that the matinee monster is easily the most visually interesting of all the Hyde Street inhabitants. I mean, he's a green Frankenstein monster with part of his face obscured, and the part that you can see has nails hammered into it. I mean, my college photography professor would have had a field day with this character. Did you forget about the whole nails in the face thing? Well, I didn't, because this is Hyde Street. Yup, they can do that.